Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Brazil has reported a record increase in the daily number of COVID-19 cases as well as the deaths. The country logged over 69,000 infections in the past 24 hours. 1,599 people died overnight, with the toll crossing 90,000. In the US, more than 61,000 tested positive and 1,200 died overnight, raising the death toll to over 150,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 32 people lost their lives in the past 24 hours, with the death toll crossing 5,900. 1,114 new cases were recorded, with the tally more than 277,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 667,000 lives, while infecting more than 17 million people. Over 1,000 Muslims will perform one of the most important rituals of Hajj today in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. After spending the day at Mount Arafat in reverent prayer, the pilgrims will stay the night at Muzdalifah. Muslims from abroad are not attending the pilgrimage amid the coronavirus pandemic, while last year nearly 2.5 million pilgrims from all over the globe performed the ritual. The Taliban say they will complete the release of 1,000 government prisoners before Eid al-Adha as part of a prisoner swap. In a Taliban tweet, Suhail Shaheen urged Kabul to free the remaining Taliban prisoners to pave the way for intra-Afghan talks. This follows President Ashraf Ghani's announcement of starting peace talks next month after the completion of the prisoner swap. The Taliban have already declared a 3-day ceasefire on Eid al-Adha. Unidentified attackers have killed 14 villagers and wounded another 6 in Nigeria's central Kogi state. In a statement, police said assailants on motorcycles randomly opened fire on locals in the Agbudu village. And Italian champions Juventus have suffered a shock 2-0 defeat at the hands of 13th place Cagliari at the Sardegna Arena. Both Luca Gagliano and Giovanni Schumann scored in the first half for the hosts as they valiantly denied an old lady onslaught to keep a clean sheet. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now for the news in detail. Brazil has reported a record increase in the number of cases as well as deaths, with over 69,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. Nearly 1,600 more people have died in the country, taking the toll to over 90,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 667,000 lives while infecting more than 17 million people. More details in this report.
The new coronavirus is wreaking havoc in the Americas, with over 150,000 being infected and thousands dying every day. The pandemic is raging in Brazil, where Mexico and Peru are struggling to contain the outbreak. In the US, more than 61,000 tested positive, while over 1,267 died in the last 24 hours, raising the death toll to over 150,000. The aggressive spread of the virus has been called into question President Donald Trump's push to open the country's economy.
As we have emphasized throughout the pandemic, the path forward for the economy is extraordinarily uncertain and will depend in large part on our success in keeping the virus in check. Indeed, we have seen some signs in recent weeks that the increase in virus cases and the renewed measures to control it are starting to weigh on economic activity.
Europe's fear of Spain's consistent increase in new cases has stalled plans of lifting travel restrictions. Despite repeated appeals by the Spanish government not to cut the country off, the UK urges caution is necessary.
But it's absolutely essential we acted when we did. It's why all 4 nations of the United Kingdom acted together, and the figures since have turned out to justify that action. So we have to, I think, have a clear message and make sure that we act by adding entire countries to that list for the time being.
In Asia, spread in mainland China continues to inch up, with Beijing reported 105 new cases, the country's highest in months. But the outbreak in South Korea appears to have slowed as new cases dropped to 18, the lowest in a month. Meanwhile, Australia has reported the highest number of cases since the coronavirus pandemic began. The worst-hit state of Victoria reported 723 infections and 13 deaths overnight.
In Pakistan now, over 90% of COVID-19 patients have recovered. The Health Ministry said the number of active cases has dropped to 25,347. The ministry said 32 more people have died, increasing the tally to nearly 6,000. It said over 1,100 tested positive in the last 24 hours, taking the count to over 277,000. The ministry said 1,179 patients of COVID-19 are in a critical condition. Sindh remains the worst-hit province with over 120,000 infections, while Punjab has reported nearly 93,000 cases. The U.S. Special Representative KHALILZAD has arrived in Kabul to push for intra-Afghan negotiations. The U.S. envoy held meetings with President Ashraf Ghani and head of the High Council for National Reconciliation, Abdullah. In a statement, Presidential Palace said the leaders discussed the completion of prisoner swap and the reduction in violence, which are prerequisite to takes. Earlier, Taliban spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said the group will be releasing all remaining Afghan prisoners. Shaheen asked Kabul to fulfill its end of the peace deal and free the remaining 5,000 Taliban detainees. Over 1,000 Muslims will perform one of the most important rituals of Hajj today in Saudi Arabia. After spending the day at Mount Arafat in reverent prayer, the pilgrims will stay the night at Muzdalifah. More details in this report.
Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which is mandatory for affluent Muslims to perform at least once in their lifetimes. The pilgrimage commemorates the sacrifices of Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, and his family. It is performed in 7 steps, starting from the 8th day of the lunar month of Zil-Hajj. Some of these rituals are performed across the world by Muslims on the eve of Eid al-Adha. Muslims from abroad are not attending the pilgrimage to curb the possible spread of COVID-19 and ensure social distancing. While last year nearly 2.5 million pilgrims from all over the globe performed Hajj. Saudi Arabian officials say all measures have been taken to prevent the spread of coronavirus during the pilgrimage.
Moving on now, the United States has issued fresh sanctions targeting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's son. Syrian Army 1st Division unit is also designated among other 14 individuals and entities. The curbs were imposed under the Caesar Act, which was designed to deter actors who continue to aid the Assad regime. It marks the second round of sanctions imposed by Washington under the act. The U.S. blames the Assad government of killing hundreds of thousands of people in the 9-year-long civil war. In a tweet, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the sanctions aim to force al-Assad to cease his brutal war. The United States has threatened Brazil of consequences if it allows China's HUAWEI technologies into its 5G network. In an interview, U.S. Ambassador to Brazil Todd Chapman said Brazil can suffer a drop in foreign investment if it persists with HUAWEI. Chapman said firms hesitate to invest in countries where intellectual property is not protected. The U.S. envoy said Washington is willing to assist its allies who choose to buy telecoms infrastructure from trustworthy suppliers. President Donald Trump has created the U.S. International Development Finance Corp to counter China's global influence with a $60 billion fund. Earlier last month, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro said the 5G deployment will have to meet national sovereignty and data security requirements. Now, China has strongly opposed the European Union's restrictions of exports to Hong Kong. In a press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China. He said Hong Kong affairs are purely the internal matters of China and no country has the right to interfere. Wang said the EU measures violate the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. He urged the bloc to respect China's position and actions on safeguarding national security in Hong Kong. Earlier, the EU agreed to a package of measures in response to Beijing's new security law imposed in Hong Kong. Moving on, the United Arab Emirates says it supports Egypt's efforts to resolve the crisis in Libya. In a phone call, UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan and his Egyptian counterpart Sami Shoukry discussed regional issues. The Foreign Ministry said the leaders discussed ways of supporting the ongoing efforts to promote a political settlement to the crisis. It said Sheikh Abdullah also emphasized the historical and strategic relations binding the two countries. Libya has been torn apart by a civil war between the Government of National Accord and the Libyan National Army. Abu Dhabi and Cairo supports LNA's commander Khalifa Haftar against the UN-recognized government. The UN and the OIC has welcomed the implementation of the RIYADH agreement signed by Yemen's government and the Southern Transitional Council. The mechanism covers maintenance of ceasefire and de-escalation between the legitimate government and the southern rebels. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, called the move an important step towards the peaceful resolution of the conflict in Yemen. In a statement, Secretary General of OIC, Youssef Al-Othaymin, reiterated the implementation of deals reflects success of Kingdom's political efforts. He said the Kingdom adopted a balanced approach in dealing with both parties. Earlier, Yemen's government and the Southern Transition Council agreed to return to a stalled peace deal brokered by Saudi Arabia. Now, Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi has instructed security forces to refrain from use of violence on demonstrators. This comes after 3 people were killed during demonstrations against the power cut in Baghdad and Najaf this week. In a statement, Kadhimi's media office said the Prime Minister also asked officials to meet the legitimate demands of protesters. It said Kadhimi held meetings with top security officials of the country, including head of the National Security Agency. The office said they discussed security issues and ways to tackle criminal gangs, kidnapping and killing protesters. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on. Unidentified attackers have killed 14 villagers and wounded another 6 in Nigeria's central Kogi state. The police has termed the incident as communal violence. In a statement, police said assailants on motorcycles randomly opened fire on locals in the Agbudu village. It said 13 of the dead have been identified as members of the same family. Police said an investigation has been launched into the incident, adding that a long-standing row over land rights was a possible motive. Over to Mali, where the opposition has threatened a second wave of civil disobedience if President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta does not resign. Opposition leader Joël Maïga said the second phase will start 3 days after the Muslim festival of Eid al-Adha. The first movement was suspended after regional leaders stepped in to solve the crisis. But they have failed to mediate a truce as the political deadlock between the government and the opposition continues. The demand for Keïta's resignation started in June over a crumbling economy and alleged corruption. President Keïta has been in office since 2013. Now, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has agreed to withdraw federal agents from Portland, Oregon. The decision was taken after weeks of violent clashes with Black Lives Matter protesters. In a statement, Oregon Governor Kate Brown said the government agreed to a phased withdrawal of federal officers. She said a consensus was reached after her discussion with Vice President Mike Pence. But the Homeland Security said it will maintain its presence until conditions improved. The governor said Oregon State police officers will maintain the peace in the city. Trump has sought to crack down on demonstrations to highlight his focus on law and order amid protests after George Floyd's killing. U.S. President Donald Trump says he never raised the issue of Moscow offering bounty to kill American troops in Afghanistan with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Trump was responding to reports of U.S. intelligence that indicates Russia issued rewards for the Taliban to kill American forces. In an interview, Trump said the intelligence never reached his desk. The president said he discussed other issues, including nuclear proliferation, with Putin in their latest conversation. In June, the New York Times reported that a Russian intelligence secretly offered bounties of up to $100,000 to the Taliban for killing coalition forces. Now, in Japan, one person has been killed while 17 are injured in a suspected gas leak explosion at the Onyasai restaurant in the Fukushima prefecture. Country's fire department said the injured were taken to the hospitals as 2 victims remain in serious condition. Authorities said there was no sign of a fire at the site of the recently renovated restaurant that was due to reopen on Friday. They said the blast blew out walls and windows of the building. The local government has closed off and evacuated the area. In a statement, the company apologized to the victims and said it is working with the authorities to determine the cause of the incident. Bangladesh says around 37% of the country has been flooded after recent spells of torrential monsoon rains. The country's National Disaster Response Coordination Center says over 5 million people in 31 districts have been affected by floods. It said people of the low-lying areas have been worst affected. The center said over 900 kilometers of roads have been washed away by the floods. It said 119 people have died from the torrential rains this year so far. In India now, the slums of the country's commercial capital Mumbai are estimated to have over half of their residents with coronavirus infection. The alarming figures emerged after a government think tank conducted a survey in slum areas of Chembur, Matunga and Dahisar. The results included nearly 7,000 people in the city of around 20 million. Scientists believe the sample tested was statistically robust and representative. Mumbai has so far recorded around 110,000 infections, while nearly 6,200 people have died from the virus. Residents of those slums say they are badly suffering because of the pandemic. The European Commission has signed a contract with the makers of COVID-19 life-saving drug remdesivir to secure treatment doses for the region. The bloc said the deal with Gilead will ensure the treatment of approximately 30,000 patients presenting severe COVID-19 symptoms. The EU Commission spokeswoman Dana Spinant said the Commission has agreed to pay $74 million to purchase this life-saving drug. On July 3rd, remdesivir became the first treatment to be authorized for a conditional marketing. The medicine has been declared first known treatment for COVID-19. The European Union has sent 41 tons of humanitarian aid to South Sudan through 45 air bridge flights. The EU Commission said it has financed the delivery of over 1,100 tons of medical equipment to critical areas in Africa, Asia and the Americas this year. It said the air bridge flights transported 1,475 medical and humanitarian staff since its launch on May 8, 2020. Commissioner for Crisis Management, Janis Lenarcic, says the bloc will continue to coordinate at international level during the pandemic. He also said the EU is closely coordinating with the UN flight operations managed by the World Food Programme. Television's biggest awards, the 72nd Emmys, will be held virtually this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Executive producers have written to Emmy nominees that there will not be a traditional gathering in Los Angeles. The producers say they are mulling over the details, including what elements will be live or if winners will be informed beforehand. Earlier, the nominations for the 2020 awards were announced, which Netflix nominated with a record 160. It was followed by HBO with 107 nominations, including a surprise nod for Zendaya, the 23-year-old star of the teen drama Euphoria. The envelopes are scheduled to be unsealed on September 20th during a ceremony broadcasted by ABC and hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. Now, stocks in Asia Pacific are trading higher after the US Federal Reserve left interest rates unchanged. Mainland Chinese stocks are trading mixed, with the Shanghai Composite up fractionally, while the Shenzhen Component shed slightly. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has gained over 1%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 has edged down, while the Topix Index lost around 0.5%. South Korea's Kospi moved up marginally. Over in Australia, the ASX 200 has gained over 0.5%. Overall, the MSCI Asia ex-Japan Index rose over 0.5%. Newly crowned Italian champions Juventus have suffered a shock 2-0 defeat at the hands of the 13th place Cagliari at the Sardegna Arena. Both Luca and Giovanni scored in the first half for the hosts as they valiantly denied an old lady onslaught to keep a clean sheet. Cagliari's clean sheet meant star striker Cristiano Ronaldo's hopes of finishing the season as top scorer also faded away. The Portuguese attacker is on 31 goals for the season, 4 behind Lazio's Ciro Immobile with only one league game left to play. Earlier, Lazio beat relegated Brescia by 2-0 in as Immobile hit his 35th goal of the season, one short of Gonzalo Higuain's record of 36 goals. Elsewhere, AC Milan won 4-1 at Sampdoria. Lace came back after beat Udinese 2-1, while Sassuolo thumped Genoa 5-0 at home. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.